Today on Locked On Rockies, just how interesting is the job for the Colorado Rockies? Plus, big moments for former Rockies in the playoffs. It's kind of fun to see.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the third day of October in the year 2025. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot, because that's what we do around here each and every weekday, free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies, just like so many of you have in the wake of the big news for the Rockies. We'll read some comments here, continue exploring this as well. I know there was the Denver Post looking out to that. We'll get into conversation of possible names here. I still want to kind of just stay in the waters of just how significant this moment is, and just kind of read some of your comments that you've left and kind of react to some of those in the same spirit of things. But I also want to ask the question too, how interesting is this job? I can sit here as a fan of the Rockies and as someone hoping that some brainchild genius is going to come in and change the fate of the organization, certainly. But when you look at it, when you look at brass tacks, how interesting of a job is it? Because it's a job that is full of challenge and a long road ahead. So we'll see how much, because it just begs the interesting question of the involvement of the ownership, and what does that relationship look like? All right, before we go any further, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So let's just start with my big question here, and my question is, truly, how interesting is this job for people? You can kind of see, and of course, some people will, as much as I was hyping it up there in the reaction episode, kind of talking about this being a prime opportunity and a team ripe for an innovative mind to come in there. That's all well and dandy. But then when you actually think about it and you consider the work that needs to be done, and how important even starting with this offseason is, you need the construction to start forming something has to start happening sooner rather than later. And the longer this process takes, the less time you have to get prepared through this offseason to start laying what is the foundation of a rebuild that's probably going to continue for multiple years. But it is, that kind of like brings me back to the question. You have this long road ahead. You have a farm system with intrigue. I mean, I think some people are a little more critical of the farm system. There are guys that can have some flashes. The Rockies have had some high draft picks here, and there. So I'm not going to call it totally desolate, right? I'm not going to, it's not the best farm system. Certainly, the Rockies don't have a ton of top 100 prospects, but it's not like that there isn't some possibility, at least there. A couple of what ifs, a couple of things, let's see what happens here type of stuff. Same with on the roster currently. You got your Hunter Goodman, you got your Jordan Beck, Ezekiel Tovar. What is Brenton Doyle? What is Mickey Moniak back? There are other questions there, certainly, but you got a couple of things of intrigue there. Certainly not enough to make you hyper competitive, especially when you're looking at the rotation side of things. So you kind of got a little something there, right? Again, not the most impressive stuff. So not the most enticing farm system, not the most enticing roster across the board. Real long rebuild ahead, tough division. And then above everything, you have the ownership. So that's I mean, I think that has to be one of the biggest questions and one of the biggest things when we talk so much, and when we've talked so much on the show about reputation and what the Rockies' reputation is in this series or in baseball. You have to wonder if that makes some people hesitate. If that makes some people think that they can't do what they think that, get the job done. If the front office doesn't relinquish the control and allow for the new folks to come in, the new GM and baseball ops people, if they're being stonewalled, if they're being blocked, and if they're being, if they're being prevented from executing their vision and plan, like there are, they probably can talk to some people with ties to the Rockies and get that. Yeah, that's, at the end of the day, you're still beholden to what the ownership does. So it's going to be I think it's an interesting conversation probably that the Rockies have to be having when they are talking to these people, because the Rockies can't escape the reputation even in those meetings. Obviously, when you're interviewing for a position like that, you want to make sure that you're not offending anybody or being rude or anything like that. But it's not like people aren't walking into their interview with the brass of the Rockies front office, and they don't know, they at least aren't familiar with it through personal connection or meeting them or talking to them. They're not at least familiar with the Rockies' reputation throughout the league. So it's not only a finding the right candidate, bringing in the right candidate. It's also about changing and reevaluating how you do things at the top. So I think that there's just a lot of variables, as much as I sit there and, because on the flip side, when you're talking about the positive, the upside, the ownership can point to and say, look at what, and I know we hate, I've harped on this too, with as much relying on 2007 they've done, but they can point to that. They can point to the back-to-back playoff years, and they can say, we know what happens in this town when the Rockies are good and competitive. We have not been successful in replicating that and making it so that we are not making it so that we are doing that on a consistent basis. How can you help us get there? This team will buy into you and your vision if you can bring them the competitive baseball team. And I think that challenge is going to be intriguing for some folks. That will be a driving force, because I will say this, the one thing I think that I am optimistic about with the Rockies is I do believe that if they buy into the plan of whoever they bring in, I think they're going to provide the resources for that person to execute the plan. I think when we've seen that kind of talk about resources in the press stuff, and I'm guessing here, and I'm taking a whiff of the hopium here, but my point is, I think that it's possible. I think that this is the moment that if something is going to change, if they are going to allow someone to execute their vision, give them the resources, the stage is set for that if the team follows through. So I think that's just kind of the interesting question I have to kind of put a little bit of a bow here on it, because I want to read some of your guys' comments here from throughout the last couple of days to wrap things up. But it's an interesting spot to be in right now for the Rocky fan. I think while cautious optimism should be where you're at, I don't blame you for the doubts as well. I don't blame you for being in the camp of prove me wrong first. prove that you're going to go outside the org, prove that you're going to do something differently than what you've shown us. Because they have to do a lot of proving, and they have to show, even if it looks like an ugly year, we have to start seeing the progress. At the end of next season, we have to see guys taking steps forward and the Rockies improving in areas. The Rockies cannot be declining again, as they have been for 7 straight seasons now, getting worse and worse now over these last 3 seasons as well. At the end of next year, there needs to be guys that we can sit there and say had Hunter Goodman-esque seasons, had surprising seasons, showing flashes, showing possibilities, showing that they are going to be not just capable of playing Major League Baseball, but impact players at the Major League level. We need to start looking at an improved run differential, improved pitch. We need to see improvement. And there's a lot of room for that in the wake of this season. A 60-win season next year is an improvement. And if the numbers and the run differentials and the strikeouts and others, if we see improvement, that's a good sign. It's a sign that things are getting back on track. But that's a long way to go to get to that point. The team has a lot of proving it to do and a lot of work to do ahead of that. All right, let's take a break here, and then I want to read some comments from the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section reacting to the news of the Rockies parting ways with Bill Schmidt and what they think is up next for the Rockies. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. You can make your starting lineup in under a minute, and PrizePicks just added stacks. So if you want to ride with a player, you can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also, you can follow other players in the app and copy their lineups with one click. And the new injury reboot feature allows you a second chance. If a player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't count against you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Locked On Rockies here, back with you on today's episode of Locked On Rockies, reacting to a big week in Rockies history here. I want to read comments from the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section here. We'll start with Randy. Thank you for broadcasting the real stats as opposed to the praise that other media outlets are vomiting. When I read the possible replacements, I was disappointed in the naming of the outsiders because they used to be connected with the Rockies and are simply coming back. Simply coming back means that Monforts will simply be too hands-on because these people aren't new. Another thought, this must have been a last-minute decision, which is disturbing. The team had to know back in July this needed to and was going to happen. In other words, the replacement should already be named and in place, but of course the Rockies are always slow to change. And that one's really interesting, right? Like, we saw this coming. A lot of people, talked about this. We saw the direction of the season. We saw where it was going. We saw how things were playing out. Maybe a little mirage, and who knows how impactful that strong second start to the second half of the season was in terms of this decision. But it's true. It's I don't know if it's a rush decision as much as it's just a why now? Why didn't you set yourself up to be hitting the ground running this offseason? If the search is just starting now, you're behind. The winter meetings are not that far away. Spring training is going to just be mere months when you're talking about the timeline of how much needs to be done with the Rockies and with the Rockies baseball operations. Every day is important, or it should be. So that is the question. Was this a decision that came down to the last day of the season and they needed to stew on it, or it needed Walker to come in and start saying, like, we can't continue like this, and they had to appoint Walker and get him into the full position now with him taking over with the season over now? The timing does remain strange. Even if there's not an answer or a real explanation, it's still pretty classic Rockies for them to be, pretty late to the announcing of moving on who they got. And then it is, you're behind on people that have already been searching and talking and interviewing and doing stuff behind the scenes. No matter what you think the rules are, there's still conversations happening all the time. So thank you for that, Randy. Marco says, hope bit some of us in the preseason, but I'm hopeful again that the Rocks will indeed go outside the organization with their GM hire. Like Mulder's poster from the X-Files, I want to believe. We all want to believe. I mean, and that's the toughest part too, is we all want to feel like it. That's what's been so disheartening about this, is every time we've hyped ourselves up or talked ourselves into something in the offseason, or some small moment pops up and we start freaking out or really buying into it. It stinks that we have to only capture all that stuff because things do feel so hopeless. This, you should feel a sense of hope. You should feel a sense of change or a possibility, because the door is open for it. And though we know a likely outcome, or though we know what history and what the Rockies have kind of shown us over time demonstrates that that we shouldn't be very hopeful, but things can change. One thing that it kind of just like sticks in my brain, at least a little bit, and I don't think it's it's not a 1-for-1 comparison, but the Florida Panthers were notoriously bad, notoriously awful. The same thing extended into their organization as a whole, their leadership, their ownership, and there's been a lot more changing of hands in that organization. But I'm just saying, at one point, that organization hit a rock bottom moment, brought in new people, and I'm not a hockey guy. I don't know who the GM is, and I don't know all the moves that have been made. But I'm just saying, like, just from kind of a zoomed out look at it, that team was so bad, so awful, laughingstock, possibly moving, a million things about it. And now they've been the best team in hockey for 3 years, 4 years, at least 2 when you're talking back-to-back cups, and then going to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. That was a team that hit a lowest of low points. And they reached the highest of high points, including doing something that's really, really, really hard to do. Repeat. Go to 3 straight, eyeing 4 straight finals. So when it comes to hope, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that things can change. Things can improve for the Rockies. It's just probably going to take a while, and it's going to take the team taking a risk on some people and being successful at that. And just hiring people and just saying, go hire the right person, go do this, it's very easy to say. But for everything to pan out, for the Rockies to become a continuously competitive baseball team, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of luck too. Jordan says, I personally like Thad Levine for the role. He has ties to the Rockies and built some decent mid-payroll teams with the Twins. At least they are a competitive baseball team making real baseball moves with real MLB caliber players who sell at the deadline and develop prospects. All the things the Rockies aren't very good at. Thad Levine might not be the greatest GM of all time, but I bet he can get the Rockies back to 500 baseball faster than any internal hire/promotion. McKay and Moore are also fine by me. Just for the love of my sanity, hire an independent outside voice with some track record and then let them cook. This isn't that hard. But I think my one thing that I want to push back a little bit on this, I don't want any tie to the Rockies. I want a completely fresh, new relationship, and I want it to be one where the ownership of the Rockies puts the pressure on themselves to adapt and change and grow with that relationship. Even if it was 20 years ago, even if it was, down the line and different things, and because that's generations ago. I want to see this team innovate. I want this team to recognize, understand, and thrive in its creative situation. And so, again, if you have the ties, it's 20 years ago, and is that going to be a total deal breaker for me? No. But this is the chance to do something you've never done before as a team. Try something different. Try to change your fate. Try to change things up, especially as down the line, you're looking at possible expansion with realignment and there's possible work stoppage. I mean, there's a lot of big picture stuff that's going on with the Rockies right now. And I just want it to be severed from the Monfort influence, at least of what's happened of late. Obviously, when you come work for the Rockies, you're going to be in the Monfort sphere of influence. That's impossible to stay out of it. But at least before they take the job, because I want them to come in and I want them to hit the organization with the reality check of, this is what everyone is saying about you behind the other closed doors. This is what the league is saying to you. This is how far behind you are. This is where we are weak, and this is where we need to grow, and this is how we need to build. And if that's going to be too contentious, if that's going to be another situation where it'll be Dick Monfort butting heads or something, or not getting along with a front office member, then that's a problem. Because it cannot be Dick Monfort's way or the highway anymore. That ship has sailed. And they need to keep an open mind and go outside the organization here. There's more comments. We had a lot of comments this week. We had a lot of people tuning in this week. So shout outs to everyone. Thank you so much. We got to take another break, but to put a bow on today's episode, I want to talk about just how fun the playoffs have been. And what a moment, what a series for two former Rockies. Let's talk about that coming up next. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that will make this show possible, and that includes FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That could be for a crazy 3-leg parlay that could cash and hit big, or you could go for a prop bet because you got a hunch that this player, maybe, I don't know, Cortland Sutton for a touchdown. You can go for that, or you can get in on the action, live lines during the game. It makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today. And when your first $5 bet hits, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets once that $5 bet wins. All you got to do, download the FanDuel app today and get started. Visit FanDuel.com. Locked On Rockies here, wrapping things up for today's episode and this week. A big week in Rockies baseball. Started quiet, and then the big news came. So we'll still want to get your reaction, still want to know what's on your mind, as we want to know what's on your mind throughout the offseason here, as it is should be a busy one for the Rockies. But how far behind have they started? Have they started off slowly here? And is that a big deal to you? Let me know in the comments below. But what a series for Trevor Story and Ryan McMahon. Trevor Story, the big offensive threats there, of course. And then, I mean, listen, for a guy that, it's tough to always see guys go out and have their signature moments that played for the Rockies outside of the org. But that's why we all knew, right? If you're watching that game or you watch the replay, you know Ryan McMahon's catching that ball. You know he's catching that ball. He's that good. And the offense, different story. But you can't deny the fact that Ryan McMahon plays incredible defense, and that was a really smart play management, I think, by the Yankees in that series. Ryan McMahon not starting in that series, but the Yankees building up the lead. They make the defensive shift. They're bringing McMahon into the game later on, and he goes out and he dives into the Red Sox dugout, making a play that who knows what could have happened. It was a good lead, and it was a ball in foul territory, so it's not like there was too much going on there, but. Man, I just think it's just always I root for Rockies when they move on. I don't think that I can't really think of any off the top of my head, that it's I guess it gets a little complicated with Arenado sometimes. That one's just deeper, but it's not I don't actively like seethe against the Rockies if they move on, especially trade at the trade deadline where it's just like, well, the Rockies that was the Rockies moving on, but it was just really cool to see and really great for them to have their moments. Trevor Story limited by injury, massive. I believe I saw he was like he and someone else were combined for 7 hits in the series, and the rest of the team had 7 in that 3-game set. They're going into that game 3. So after an injury-plagued season, good for Story to be able to kind of really establish himself as the guy that the Red Sox went out and got and signed, and what he can do, clearly impacting that series. And Ryan McMahon picked up a base knock, a few base knocks in that series as well. Didn't have a horrendous batting average in those 3 games. Then, of course, makes the big defensive stop. And just really cool to see a guy that as much as it was as frustrating as it was to be in Colorado, I'm sure for Ryan McMahon, a guy that never really complained, a guy that was very loyal to the team, and a guy that really showed up in some big moments, especially defensively. And there's just the amazing photos, not only of him diving into the dugout and making the play, but him catching that final out, and the whole crowd behind him just erupting. And you can just tell. It's you can't help but think of just like what does it feel to be those players in that moment where they started and where they came from, and what their experience with the Rockies was. Story's got a little had the postseason, at least sniffed the postseason and the slight taste of the postseason there with the Rocks as well. But it's just one of those things where it's cool to see. But then it is kind of a heartbreaker where it's just like, man, look at those guys making signature moments in a different uniform, and no one's going to remember what they did for the Rockies. It's so, kind of a double-edged sword there, but really cool to see. Ryan McMahon's going to be the one moving on, as the Red Sox are the first team to lose since the new wild card thing after winning Game 1. I thought that was a very interesting stat there of that win-loss record. But always rooting for the Rockies, always rooting for players we loved watching here, and we'll see what happens next, as the postseason has been very fun so far. Maybe the Padres heading home early, so the Dodgers remain. Do you have some doubts about the Dodgers? Are we allowed to say that after they won the series? I don't think so. They're the only ones that swept. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here on Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Be part of the show. Like the video, subscribe. Tell everyone you know that likes the Rockies about the show. Really helps. Really makes an impact. Check out Locked On MLB and Locked On MLB Game Night for your second listen of the day. And if you need more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Avalanche, Nuggets, Buffs, free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on YouTube. Until next time, I'm Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.